Joining me now, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson. Here in studio with me, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin and Hofstra University professor of law and former attorney at the Brennan Center for Justice's Democracy Program, James Sample. It's great to have everybody here. It's an important discussion. The government was supposed to give answers, right, to very specific questions about Kilmar Abrego Garcia's whereabouts and their plans for his return, but this is part of what they wrote in their filing. In this case, defendants are not in a position where they can share any information requested by the court. That is the reality. What happens now?
Well, as you noted, Chris, we're in the middle already of a hearing that started 3 minutes ago before Judge Paula Zinnes in the District of Maryland. But the reason they say they're not in a position to share that information is because they are resisting what the Supreme Court essentially ordered them to do. The Supreme Court said to Judge Zinnes, you need to clarify your earlier temporary restraining order, which directed the government to facilitate and effectuate Mr. Abrego Garcia's return. He ordered her to clarify the use of the word effectuate with due regard for the fact that the executive has control over the foreign affairs of the country. Now what his administration is saying, incredibly, in a court filing, is that such due regard for the administrative power means that she can't put them on any timeline, that judicial review basically doesn't supersede their constitutional authority subject to the president's ability to control foreign affairs. I expect Judge Zinnes will have harsh words for them at this hearing this afternoon.
She does already. She does already. If you go into the document, again, people who watch us all the time are familiar with this. We have producers who are inside who are taking notes. So, again, this is not exact because they're typing along as quickly as they can. But she affirmed last night in short order the court amended its prior order and made clear what the government must do to comply, James. And she said three areas are first, current physical location. What steps, if any, have been taken to facilitate the defendant's immediate return? And what steps you will take and when to return him home? That's clear.
It's clear, and if you think about it, it's so minimal. We're asking so little. She is asking so little of the government, and they are still...
With the unanimous backing of the Supreme Court of the United States.
Absolutely. And in fact, not just 9 justices of the Supreme Court, but all 13 federal judges who have looked at this matter have ruled in the exact same way, rejecting the government's fundamental proposition here, which is the government's fundamental proposition is, yeah, we made a mistake. So what? Tough luck. On to the next. All 13 judges, including the district court judge, Paula Zinnes, including 3 judges on the Fourth Circuit, and all 9 justices of the Supreme Court reject the government's position, and yet the government is still resisting, even as to that little modicum of information that you mentioned.
Right now they are, and I want to get both of your reactions to this, and James, I'll start with you. Why did you not comply with the order to give me some knowledge of where he is? Your Honor, we are still reviewing the Supreme Court decision. What do you mean? What do you mean? Where is he?
It's incredible. The Supreme Court's decision released yesterday was 4 pages long. 4 pages long. This is, I mean, Drew Ensign, he may be a great attorney, but over the last couple of weeks, he's essentially the person who says, I didn't do my homework and has a different excuse every single time. Now, he may, in fact, be doing his homework. He is clearly doing the bidding of the Department of Justice, of Pam Bondi. I mean, the Justice Department lawyer who answered questions honestly in this matter was put on administrative leave, was suspended because the Justice Department lawyer answered the questions honestly. So now we should not be surprised to be getting answers like, how could we possibly know where he is?
Well, it's interesting because then she says, so you're saying you have no evidence as to where he is. That's not the position of the U.S.
No.
I cannot relay that knowledge.
Right. So I think that they are trying to determine, they're trying to buy themselves some time, right? They clearly filed something so that nominally they could say that they complied with her order, but they are tap dancing as fast as they can, to borrow a musical theater reference, right? They're like Billy Flynn in Chicago, trying to make it up as they go along, trying to figure out what their legal position is going to be, because they do have some of that information, Chris, at their disposal. They've chosen not to share it with her while they figure out Are they going to appeal her clarification of the TRO to the Fourth Circuit? Are they going to go back to the Supreme Court? Are they just going to openly flout the order and say that none of this should be subject to judicial review and place all that emphasis on last night's decision saying that Judge Zinnes has to have due regard for the executive's authority over foreign affairs? They are clearly stretching that phrase beyond the meaning that I think all 9 justices of the Supreme Court intended it to have, even though there is some daylight between, for example, the conservatives on the court and some of the liberals who thought that the judge was within her power to say he should come back right now. And really, what they are trying to do is dance between this tension of, can a district court order the executive of the United States to retrieve a foreign citizen from a foreign prison where he is solely because of the administrator's past decisions?
Plaintiffs, do you know where he is? No, we do not. This is extremely troubling, the judge says. So my next one, what steps have you taken to get him back? The way I look at this, says the judge, the Supreme Court stayed my order, and it was also in full effect from Friday through Monday. She is laying down the law. So let me ask you about the possibilities here. It seems to me that there are 3. Possibility number 1 is that suddenly they come up with this information and they hand it over, which at least based on the opening minutes of this court hearing, that's not going to happen. Defy, just outright defy and don't do it. The third option, I would think, is that they could say, OK, we're going to try, but then say they fail. Because remember, the Salvadoran government has declared that anybody who is imprisoned there will never leave. What, though, if they defy?
Well, I mean, you set up the 3 options, and I think maybe a 4th option, which is to say we tried, right? That's one option. To outright defy and to be transparent that they are outright defying. The Stephen Millers of the world in the administration may actually see this particular vehicle, this case, as a sympathetic one for them to say, yeah, we're going to ignore these court orders and that this is the battle that they want. There's another option, which is that they may decide that it's worth the public relations to simply bring Mr. Abrego Garcia back. Because let's be clear, I don't think they will either, but if they did, it's not as though he has a yellow brick road in front of him. No. It's not as though he lives out his days with his family in Maryland. The reality is he's only prevented from being removed specifically to El Salvador. There are a lot of ways in which the government could bring Mr. Abrego Garcia back and then still dispose of him. It's the fact that they are doubling and tripling down on this method that speaks to their designs on a larger scheme with him as the vehicle.
Well, and I want to go back to that, but I want to get Eugene in because, Eugene, the Atlantic raises this, why it might be bad for both governments if he comes back to the U.S. Quote, if Abrego Garcia returns, he could speak out about the conditions he experienced at the facility, which could have political consequences both for the Salvadoran leadership and for the Trump administration. What do you see is going on here, Eugene?
Well, what I see is defiance. Basically, I see the Stephen Millers of this administration trying to take a stand against judicial review, particularly of these immigration cases. And the Supreme Court, in that recent ruling, was not having it. I think it may have to go ultimately back to the Supreme Court for clarification and perhaps a bit more force behind a subsequent order. But let's back up for a second. The administration could get Mr. Abrego Garcia back anytime it wants with a phone call to President Bukele of El Salvador, who is an ally of this administration, who has apparently a contract with this administration to house prisoners that the administration deports. A simple phone call, and I'm sure that Bukele would be very happy to comply with whatever the administration wanted. It's just that the administration does not want to obey the Supreme Court.
This is an important case, a compelling case, but Eugene, immigration activists say that the sheer breadth of what the administration is trying to do with immigration overall is overwhelming. And the New York Times is now reporting that the administration is trying to pressure people to self-deport. So they're going to cancel their Social Security numbers, then they don't have any access, right, for financial purposes. The Times reports, quote, Leland Dudek, the Social Security Administration's acting commissioner, wrote in an email to staff members that migrants, quote, financial lives would be terminated. What are we to make of that, and what a pressure campaign like that would do to folks?
Well, look at the administration's entire immigration policy is essentially to terrorize undocumented migrants into self-deportation, and that's the point, I think, of rounding men up, claiming that they belong to Tren de Aragua or MS-13, sending them to CICAT, this notorious prison in El Salvador, having the pictures from there of how the men are treated. It's all designed to terrorize people and to convince them just to leave, in part, I think, because the administration understands that it is ridiculous to think they could somehow forcibly deport 11 or 12 million people. So they want to scare as many people as they can into leaving. And this is all part and parcel of the same policy, including the defiance of this order. They're saying to people, basically, if we kick you out, no matter what the courts say, you're not getting back.